Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Friends from Film School. I'm Luke Pilgrim.
I'm Brad Kennedy.
I'm Ellis Treese.
Awesome. So this week we have another filmmaker hanging out with us. We have Hudson Phillips. He's a producer and screenwriter local to Atlanta. You know, you've written a lot of screenplays, some that's been picked up for distribution, some that have been very successful in the indie world. So welcome, to Friends from Film School.
Yeah, this is awesome. Very excited about it.
So I had a question for you, Hudson.
Yes.
Whenever we go to film festivals, a lot of times we get a chance to actually rewatch This World Alone, which I know you were the screenwriter for. And one of my favorite parts of that film is the title cards that show up in between scenes that kind of give the backstory to this girl and her journey. What was your inspiration, or why did you make the decision to actually include those title cards as part of your story? And did you know that they were going to end up being so well done with like the newspaper clippings and everything whenever it actually went into production?
Yeah, and if you could kind of describe them a little bit too, so that if they haven't seen it, so the listeners kind of understand what he's talking about there.
Totally. Yeah, I'll kind of explain the whole thing. So we it's a post-apocalyptic film, and so it's got these little sections in it where it's narrated by the main character, where she says, before the fall, this is what life was like, right? So the fall is this kind of event that knocked out like power and technology out of the world. So it's about this girl, Sam, who lives with her two mother figures in the middle of nowhere. She's never seen anybody else in her entire life. And she's kind of raised to be in this protective world. And then this event happens that forces her out of that world. And that's kind of what the movie is about. It's this coming of age story, this girl going out into the world and coming back. Those montages came out of a couple of different things. One of them was, how can we put stuff on screen that we don't have to go film, right? So we only shot for 10 days, and so you can only capture so much content in 10 days. And so we had, but this wasn't the script phase, but we were just thinking, we knew from the very beginning, this is a movie that we're going to go up and we're going to make no matter what. If we raise $0, we're still going to go make it. And so we had to think with budget in mind from the very beginning. And I'm a big fan of Mike Mills. I don't know, not the REM guy, but the filmmaker guy. And he made this movie Beginners and made the movie 20th Century Women. And he does these kind of like PowerPoint kind of presentations in his movies where he'll do a voiceover, and then it'll be like footage, or it feels kind of like a documentary. And so that's where that initial idea came from, was, hey, how do we get across this big giant event that happened without showing it? And so we were like, well, what if we talk about our present like it's the past, right? So she goes on these montages and says, before the fall, they had this thing called the internet, right? So like you're able to get across the world without having to show anything. And those montages are a bunch of, it's like public domain photos and like old ads. Like it's supposed to be stuff that she found, and she's making these collages out of them. And so also we did a crowdfunding campaign. And so one of the bonuses you could get in that crowdfunding campaign was to have your photo in the movie. So I have a bunch of
okay, that's cool.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. And so and how it came across, I had no idea. I thought it would be much more simple, like you just see one image. And both Jordan and I are designers for our day jobs, and so he just went way overboard with the textures and layers and just made it look so cool. And I think he really enjoyed that process. And that was also something we were rewriting well after the movie was finished, because it was kind of the last thing we could add. And so we had Belle, who plays the main character, record her voiceover for those like 2 days before we finalized the film. So,
oh wow,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I thought that was super creative. We definitely were talking about that, on the ride back from the film fest.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Thank you.
So
the movie was awesome.
Yeah,
I loved it.
I had no idea you guys had seen it, so that's really cool that we can actually talk about it.
Yeah, I was about to say, it took us a while. I think we knew about it because our friend Chase Yarborough had worked on it.
All right, yeah.
And so we've worked with him a lot, and then it kind of it's like we kept on hearing about it. We saw your success, online. Y'all were going to all these film festivals, and we can get into that later. But it took us a little while to finally see it, and then we were like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah. You guys saw it at North Georgia then?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe you guys filmed it in 10 days, man.
Yeah, I thought that was like
A feature.
so well done. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so the way that happened was again, we just knew we wanted to get it done. Now we filmed 10 days straight, so that's the part that I wouldn't recommend to anybody, because me and by day like 7 we were just spent. But the way we did it is we went up to Hiawassee, Georgia. We had a crew of about, between cast and everybody, probably 25 people, and so we all slept on the floor of this one house and like just spread out everywhere. We'd get up in the morning and we'd go out and shoot. We'd come home and we'd plan the next day and drink and hang out, and then you'd get up and do it all over again. So it was really this great, awesome summer camp vibe that I think brought our team together very quickly in a way that wouldn't have had we not done that. But even that was every piece of this is in the indie film thing is just so a little bit miraculous, and every bit is such an uphill battle. And so we're a week away from our shooting date, which was set in stone because Jordan was a stay-at-home dad and his wife was a teacher, and so she was going back to teach and he would have the kids full-time and could no longer make a movie. So we had 10 days up until that point. And so we're a week away, and we're on a plane flying out to San Diego Comic-Con. We were screening a short film out there. And I was sat next to this lady on the plane, and we started talking, and she says she's a journalist going out to interview people. And I tell her about this movie we're about to make, and that we're shooting in like Hiawassee, Georgia, and that we're still kind of like looking for locations and looking for money and all this stuff. And she goes, oh, well, that's funny because my husband has his family has a house in Hiawassee, Georgia. It's like a 5-bedroom house that we just go to on weekends, and they're on like 200 acres of land. So we ended up shooting on her, like half the movie on her land, finding all these amazing locations. And the cool thing about Hiawassee is everywhere you go, it's like overgrown, and like there's like a pile of like lawn mowers and a tub in the middle of the woods, and it looked like a movie set everywhere you watched. So that did a lot of the heavy lifting for us. But that lady that sat next to us on the plane, Michelle Moreland, she was in a crisis too of she just quit her kind of healthcare job and was like, I don't know what I want to do, kind of want to work in film. So she became a producer on our film, and she's produced multiple indie films around Atlanta since then as well. So it was a really kind of cool connection that made that possible.
So when y'all met, like, you didn't know she was like wanting to get into that at all, or even from the same area? That's serendipitous for sure.
So like, was it always intentional for you guys, or if budget had allowed, would you have gone more into like the world that you were creating, like, like when they have to go into town and stuff like that to get medicine and things? Is that something you would have wanted to explore further, or was it like intentional to not actually show where civilization was at?
Yeah, it was intentional not to show it, because that's not what the movie was about. It was just the setting of the world. If we had more money, we would have added more characters, and we would have added better sets and kind of better production design and that kind of stuff. That is where the money would have gone. We would have made the world a little larger. It's really
did that require any rewriting, or did you have like the script for the budget in mind, and then you were like, if we had more we would add, or did you have to scale back? From
the very beginning, it was we're going to do this with as few locations and as few people as possible. So that's what was written. The option to have more money was never an option. It was always how much could we possibly have.
Right. We can relate to that.
Yeah. And we came under our even low goal for budget, and then had to do a crowdfunding campaign in order to get up to enough to finish post and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah.
So kind of walk us through your whole journey. Obviously, This World Alone. When did y'all produce that? That was...
Man, we shot it in 2017. We did the crowdfunding campaign in 2018, finalized the film that summer, did a few screenings around town for crowdfunding supporters and cast and crew. And then we did a year-long festival run that took us to the end of 2019. And now we're trying to figure out distribution. So it's which is a whole nother world. I mean, that's the thing with the indie film thing is I'm really just a screenwriter, but I had to learn how to be a producer. I had to learn how to be a fundraiser. I had to learn how to be, work at festivals and connect with people. And like, you have all these jobs, you have to be this multi-hyphenate. And it can get to be really exhausting, especially for me on the financial side, that I've learned it just because nobody else was there to do it, you know? And so now distribution's kind of that same way. It's just this world that is, every filmmaker I reach out to has some sort of horror story about their distribution. I'm like, just how can we avoid that? So we actually, the way we were going to avoid that is just to, the guiding force in our entire filmmaking career has been connection with other people. And so, and I do this thing where I really try to come up with a very strong sense of why with each project that I start, because what I realize is when you get to these moments where you got a choice to make, you have to have some sort of guiding force, right? You can't just kind of go with your gut. And you can't always even go with data. And so our why on this project and on really most of what we do is we want to connect with people. So, making the choice to all live in one house while we shoot the movie, like that's about connection, right? Doing screenings for as part of our crowdfunding campaign instead of just sending a link, right? We wanted to connect with people. Festival Run was all about that. And so like, how can we apply that to our distribution strategy as well? And so what we ended up doing was booking a bunch of colleges and booking a bunch of art house theaters. And the plan was to go on this tour for like 2 or 3 weeks all around the United States and really connect with audiences and build our audience up so that then we would do a digital release, but we'd already have this kind of built-in audience, right? And so it would hopefully serve us and hopefully serve whoever we partner with on the digital side. And then all of this pandemic stuff happened. And so we would have already wrapped up that tour at this point. But it just really pumped the brakes on us. And now we're trying to figure out what that looks like at this point. Are
you going to still try to do it once schools start back up in the fall, or?
It's so hard to tell right now. I don't know. I mean, the other thing right now is streamers are looking for content. People are looking for content. And we're sitting on a finished film. And so it might just be that we abandon that strong sense of connection value and just say, hey, let's just get the movie out while we have the opportunity to and kind of build some momentum for the next one. But those are the difficult decisions we're having to make right now.
I love that outlook, though, because I know we talked about this on your podcast, which was filmmakers taking their careers into their own hands and really using that musician model, like you're talking about going on a tour, and but I mean, even big filmmakers like the new Jay and Silent Bob, when it came out, they did the same thing. It's because they have that type of connection with their audience already. So they booked theaters and they would do the Q&A afterwards and all that. So I love that model. I think some other friends of ours did the same thing, like Frey Ford and Catherine. They did.
Oh yeah, I know those guys. I went to one of their screenings in Atlanta, and it was awesome.
Right, yeah. And so I mean, it helps. He's like a stand-up comedian and stuff. So I think they probably did stand-up in between or whatever. But they booked venues all over and did their own little tour. And I think that's an awesome way to get your work out there.
Yeah, one of our goals was in each city we'd bring a local author out to do a reading.
That's cool.
And hopefully we'd find like somebody who has written something in post-apocalyptic world. And then we pulled together an anthology book that's like inspired by this world alone. So it's just a whole bunch of post-apocalyptic stories. And part of that was like feeding into that. So we'd go to the cities of those authors that are in the anthology, and then they would be able to do a reading beforehand and build that community and kind of like an opening band, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
That's cool.
Now we're trying to figure out, that was supposed to be released last month, and we were going to do a big kind of reading in Atlanta and all this kind of stuff. And so that's put on hold, and we got to figure that part out too.
So how does it feel, writing a post-apocalyptic movie and then now living through a pandemic? Do you feel like if you had to go back and I know, there's differences in how This World Alone kind of came to be in their world, but would you have changed anything?
Yeah, it's funny. The story I wrote for this anthology is even way more on the nose. It actually is about a virus that wipes people out and stuff. And so No, this, I actually think it's incredibly timely. The messages of the film, of what we were trying to say. It's a lot about kind of parenting, but it's a lot about, because I have a 16-year-old son, and I have a lot of these internal struggles of, do I raise this kid to really believe in hope and love and grace, or do I raise him to stand up for himself and not be pushed over, and there's those kinds of battles going on, not just as a parent, but as inside all of us, right? And so that's kind of what the movie is about, and I feel like in times like this, we need stories like that explore those questions. And the movie doesn't necessarily have an answer for those questions, but that is the theme that we're exploring and hopping around in. And the main character of the movie is kind of exploring. And I think we need that right now. I think we need to be asking those questions. How should we be reacting? We're all scared. We can react in one way or the other. We can act in a loving and caring way, or we can act in a self-protecting way. And so, yeah, I that's another reason why I kind of want to get the movie out there. Is I just feel like it would create some great conversations right now.
Yeah, I love that message. You mentioned your son, which made me think. I was reading your Voyage INTL article. So that was something I was curious about. If you could speak to just, how, I know we talk about this a lot, things happening for a reason and everything. And in the article, it was talking about how what seemed like a weakness at first was like you had to stay in Atlanta to raise a kid and everything. So it's like you couldn't move to LA, but that ended up being a strength. So could you, talk about that a little bit and maybe just give us some insight into what your journey looked like for anybody who's, aspiring to be a screenwriter or, a filmmaker in general?
Yeah, I had some early success, which was kind of a blessing and a curse. So it was only the second screenplay I'd ever written. I wrote it with two buddies of mine. We were kind of writing like comedy stuff at that time as like a writing team. And we were just in the right place at the right time, met the right people. And that script ended up getting optioned by Lionsgate Films. And it was kind of like a broad comedy about church league softball. And so it's really funny. Like I really like the script a lot still. And they were trying to, at the time, like the blue collar comedy guys were real big. And so they were trying to like, what movie could we do where we get those four guys all together? And so that was going to be this project. And then some really unexpected things happening. Like the writer's strike happened. I think Larry the Cable Guy came out with a couple of flops. Lionsgate changed their president. And so ultimately they ended up dropping it after a long amount of time. And a local Atlanta production company who was our entryway to Lionsgate had an option to purchase it if it dropped out from Lionsgate. So they did that. And then they completely threw our script out the door and completely rewrote it. And they made a movie that we still have a credit on, but I don't think any of our words actually end up on screen. So it was this real immediate success. Like when we sold to Lionsgate, we were like in like Atlanta Journal-Constitution newspaper. We were on like the local radio. Like we were like these big time Atlanta guys for 2 seconds, and then it all came crashing down. And at that time, I was really exploring, how do I keep this going? How do I, get an agent or a manager? How do I move out to LA? And I was like, even looking at apartments in LA. And at the time I was divorced, from my son's mom, and, was trying to figure out how to make all that work. And ultimately I was unable to leave and made the choice to be here, with him as much as I could. And there was a little bit of, bitterness there of like, man, I have this opportunity and I'm not chasing it. But what that allowed was, production started coming to Atlanta. I started meeting incredible filmmakers. I started making stuff on my own. And my career just took this trajectory that I wasn't expecting. But also was required. Like I fully believe had I moved out to LA at that point, I would have crashed and burned because I didn't understand what it took really to be a professional screenwriter, right? And it took going through all of this journey in order to get there. And the other thing is, I really believe that life is made up of seasons, right? So when my son was younger, it was really hard for me to find the time to write and to get stuff done. And I had to kind of accept that and said, hey, you know what? For this season, for these couple of years, I'm going to focus on my son. And now that he's older, I can put all that energy into more of my creative life and my professional life. And because of that, my career is going really well now on that side of things, and being a lot more productive. But I had to recognize that those two, and I feel like a lot of writers get frustrated. Hey, I'm a mom of 4 kids and I work a day job, and when could I possibly have time to write? And I always say, find time to write when you can, but maybe that's just 5 minutes a day. And when this season of life is over, then you'll have time to put towards that. But you have to be patient with yourself.
Yeah, that's great advice.
So I was wondering, kind of going back to the Church League softball movie, you said a lot of your words have changed from it, right? Like they didn't really go with your script. Like,
honestly, I have not seen their movie.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I read the screenplay for it, so that's how I know that none of our stuff made it in there. And I was like, I don't need to watch this movie. So the final movie though is called, if anybody wants to check it out, it's called Cracker Jack. It might be on Netflix. I can't remember. Our movie was called Church League. And so they completely redid it. It's a weird credit that we have. It's like based on a screenplay by, which I'd never heard of before. It seemed awfully specific. So, yeah.
So you don't feel like any sense of ownership or anything. It's kind of like a detached feeling then.
Not at all. I do, because I still love the concept. We've talked with them about releasing the rights to it back to us. And I've written a pilot script of trying to make it work as a TV show, which I think could be really cool, because a season of the show would be a season of the softball season, right? And so I don't know. TV's not all that much of an interest to me. I just thought that story fit that world better. It would take somebody coming along that's really motivated to try to do that. TV's hard because you are required to be in LA, you know.
So did they keep your idea? Like, did they just keep the premise and then just rewrite the script and that was it?
Yeah, they didn't really even keep the premise, just the fact that it takes place in Church League softball. But their movie is
just that little inkling of the idea, and they're like, okay, that's all we needed.
Right.
Wow.
But legally, like, it's the chain of title or whatever, the way that it started to get to where it is, that they have a right to it. But we have talked about getting those rights back from them.
Okay. Another project that you did that I was really interested in was Rooney's World. Watched it a couple of days ago. I really liked
awesome.
It.
Thanks.
And I was wondering, well, where did the inspiration come from? It kind of reminded me of like Blue's Clues whenever I was like younger. And I was wondering kind of like how that story came to be and where you drew your inspiration from.
Yeah, so Rooney's World was our very first short film. The first time I'd really ever been on set. When I was in high school, I did like extra work, and so I'd do like, big movie set or whatever. But like actually as a filmmaker, had absolutely no idea what I was doing. But Rooney's World the story is it's a Blue's Clues style host. This guy named Dave that hosts this show called Rooney's World, and he gets fired from the show. It's always ever known. And he's kind of who he is on screen is who he is in real life. This real kind of like simple, just innocent guy. And when he's fired, he has no idea what to do with his life. He's trying to piece together, how do I become an adult? And Rooney shows up, the little animated elephant shows back up in his real life and starts causing trouble for him. And that story, gosh, it's funny to hear me say that out loud now, because I'm like, oh gosh, that's where I was at that point in my life, like trying to figure out how to become an adult, right? And honestly, it's a lot of those same kind of themes of, can we hang on to innocence and magic, or do we need to put those away when we grow up? Which is interesting. I feel like those themes really run through my work. But yeah, I don't know where that first inkling came from. I remember there being a lot of kind of pitches at the time of wanting to, like, I'm trying to think, what is Death to Smoochie or something like that was a movie that came out that was like about like a Barney kind of thing. Or like, what was it? Dirty Santa or Bad Santa or whatever. Like there's all those movies about like the innocent characters where they're really bad in real life. And I was like, I want to see one where that's who they are in real life. That's so much more interesting to me if that's who they are all the time, because who can exist like that in this world? And so I think that's where that first idea came from. And again, what can we do for cheap That movie, I think, was 4.5 days, 4 days, and then a green screen day to do the show stuff. Way too ambitious, but we had no idea that we wouldn't be able to pull it off. We had one guy that paid for it, thankfully, that happened after just one text message, which was amazing. But we didn't know what it would take to do the animation on that. And we had a friend who came through on that and did an amazing job. But again, that first night we shot, we went to a restaurant at like midnight. We shot through the night and then went to a second location that morning and wrapped around like 2 in the afternoon.
That's a long shoot.
That's my first night on any kind of set creatively. But we get there and I just had no idea what I was doing. We had a couple people that did. And so that one night was my film school. That was like, you learn everything you need to know just by jumping into it. And so I really encourage people to do that. I mean, not on that scale, but at least to just do the thing and you'll be surprised by how much you learn. Way more than preparing for it, right?
Oh yeah, I agree. Where it's like, I feel like every shoot you learn something and you're like, wow, like how did we not know that 3 shoots ago? You know, and how did we somehow survive that way without knowing this? And now from here on out, we're never going to make that mistake again.
Do you guys still feel that? Because you've shot so much stuff. Because I feel like everything I make, I'm still like, every time I show up, I'm a baby on set, and I feel like I have to learn all over again.
For sure.
Still feel that way. It's still every time we get to set the first day, it's like starting over. I'm like just as nervous, you know, but then we get into the swing of like the day one's under our belt, and then I feel a little more confident and more comfortable on set.
For me, it's after day 2 where I'm like, okay, I'm good now.
Day 2 is like the hardest day.
But that last one, yeah.
But I think you always like learn something new every time you're on set, or at least you've made it this far without something, and then you finally are able to have something that you haven't had previously on sets, and you're like, wow, I need this every single time.
Yeah.
So with Rooney's, I'm sorry, Luke. You go.
Well, I was same topic. I was just curious about the animation. Did you have to do anything on set, like specific to plan for that animation, or did you guys just film it and then kind of figure it out in post?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I don't think we did anything. I don't even think we knew who was going to do the animation when we shot it. And we just kind of did our best. I'm trying to think if we ever actually planned for it. I think we'd probably just have like a ball sitting there and, hey, that's Rooney. So, look at it.
I felt like you did really well. There were a lot of shots that like...
That's all our animator, Craig... Dang it. I'm not gonna do it. But he's a fantastic animation dude, and he was doing some like Cartoon Network stuff at the time.
That's cool.
Really talented dude, and gave us a real deal on all of that animation. But there is some cool stuff in there, like Rooney's reflection in the mirror and all that kind of stuff. There was a couple of things that we did wrong, so we were trying to there was one scene we cut where the little girl's watching TV and Rooney's up on the TV, so we did like a green screen on the TV, and it just didn't work at all. I think because of the movement or something. I'm not a tech guy either, but apparently nobody was on the set that day because we screwed it up. But so there were some challenges, but mostly we were just like, hey, let's just leave room and allow for it. The more specific we got with it, the probably more the less the animator could do with it. So we just
my question with it was, when writing the script, was it ever like, this is animation, or was it like, oh, we might do puppets, like might try a different
we talked
aspect?
about puppets for sure. Yep. I would have been fine with doing puppets too. I can't remember how we actually landed on doing animation. Maybe we had found Craig by that point and we knew that it would be possible. Oh no, we had to have found him because he designed the character, and there was we had a stuffed animal made of Rooney and all this kind of stuff. Yeah, that's right. And we had props and stuff that were all the Rooney's World posters and all that kind of stuff. So that must have been what it was. We found somebody who was able to do it for us.
Yeah, I know that we run into that a lot, where if we have something that's technically challenging like that, we kind of go through, we're like, should we do this in person, create a puppet or something for this, or should we do it all animated? So it's really interesting to see that someone else has gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
But I really like the shot in Rooney's World where he first meets the woman at the I guess it's a daycare or something.
Yeah.
But the shot where it's like that wide that kind of pans back and forth, and you can like see Rooney disappear and then Rooney come back in, like showing like the difference in like what he sees versus what the woman sees. That was such a cool
that
shot.
was great. That was all Jordan, our director. Jordan Noel is the guy that directs everything that I've ever done. So I write and produce, and he directs and edits. Really amazing partnership that I wouldn't be where I'm at without him. And our brains work very differently too. First of all, we have extremely different tastes, and so we reach this wide range. I would write very kind of like overly sentimental action adventure stuff is what my thing is, and then he really reins me in with that kind of side, and then I rein in his darkness and add some light to it and all that kind of stuff. But he also thinks very visual, and I'm a very I just think in words. I don't see pictures when I'm writing. I've tried to do some like comic book writing, and I have a hard time with it because I don't see in panels. You know what I mean? I care much more about the language and the kind of themes and all that kind of stuff. So we really balance each other nicely. So I think in the script it was probably just Rooney and Dave wrestle, and then he came up with this cool shot that really shows what the audience is seeing and what he's seeing.
So yeah, describe the writing process from like writing the script to the shoot. Like, how much of your actual script is it 90% of it making into the finished film, or are you having to do rewrites where it's like, okay, now we know these limitations, now let's see what we need to work with? Talk us through that.
On Rooney's World specifically,
or that This World Alone, anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, the same thing always happens. We'll write a script. It feels pretty tight. We get on set. So for instance, on Rooney's World, there's this whole monologue where like the neighbors come over and he's trying to compete with like the other neighbor dads. And originally it was this whole mundane conversation about the type of grass in the yard, which I thought was really funny. And then we get to the location and they don't have grass in their yard. It was and so we changed it to a conversation about golf, I think. And so that kind of stuff happens, your limitations in terms of that. Other things are, I'm trying to think. So on This World Alone, we had a much longer opening where you really established the world and got to know the characters a lot better. And like one scene was like a montage, and what I've learned is like montages don't work on low budget. This happened on Rooney's World too. We're like, oh, you see him quickly in a movie theater, and you see him quickly like on these date spots, and you're like, oh wait, that means we have to go to that location and set up and and all this kind of stuff. So montages are terrible. Even the montage in This World Alone was her reading from different or reenacting different books with her pet pig. In this opening montage, and even that was like, we'll have to reset the set dressing and all this kind of stuff. And so let's just simplify it. We'll do one book that she's kind of reading to the pig. And then there was a whole nother scene that the movie was just taking too long to get going that we had to cut. And I felt bad because a lot of the stuff that we cut was we had this amazing VFX artist named V. Kelly, who like practical effects just does incredible things. She did the axe to the head and stuff in the movie, spoiler alert. But so all the scenes we cut were like her scenes, like really cool, like this chicken slaughter that we had, and she built all this like chicken stuff. There's this dream sequence that we cut that was like this burnt pig head with blood flowing and stuff. And so there's all this stuff that we had to cut for time or pacing or tone. And you learn that as you go. I'm trying to think. Another project we did was called, I didn't write it, but I produced it. And we were just running out of time in the day. That was a 1-day short film shoot. And so we're like, we don't have time to shoot 2 more scenes. And I was like, well, what if we just take dialogue from this scene we need and just insert it into here, right? And then we just shoot the one scene, and it completely worked. So there's all these things that until you put the limitations on it, you don't realize it actually makes it better. So I'm a big believer in limitations, and that's why I hope that no matter what I'm doing, we're always limited in some way, whether that be cast or crew or money, most likely. that limitations really force you to think outside of the box and really force you to get creative, and 99% of the time it always makes the end product better, I think.
Yeah, it's like, who is the filmmaker, Brad, that would cut his favorite shot?
Danny Boyle, I think.
Yeah,
Really?
it's a Danny
Yeah.
Boyle. Yeah, that's a similar concept almost, where it's like that's like a self-imposed restriction, where he's like, in his movies, he just chooses to cut like his favorite shot, which would be really hard.
Yeah.
That's like the kill your darlings thing on the writing side, I guess. But it's like that'd be tough for me. I mean, we edit all of our own stuff typically, so
Yeah.
we do have to cut things a lot. We have to cut scenes, and we know how much work went into that specific shot, or how much we loved it on paper or in our heads, or
Right.
when we storyboarded it. But then it just didn't work in the edit, maybe. And like, I remember like our first movie, The Apology Service, we spent almost the whole day of this one scene.
Yeah.
And it got cut completely. It just didn't work in the movie. It didn't make sense. It was part of a montage, I think, actually. So
that's the hardest part to me. Was 30 people worked incredibly hard on this day, and we're cutting all that stuff. Like, and it's that what's the phrase, like sunken cost fallacy kind of thing, where it's like, no, we'll put all that effort in. It needs to be in the movie, even if it doesn't make the movie better, right? And it's really hard to see that, and especially like an actor giving an amazing performance, and you're cutting it. Those are difficult decisions to make,
dude. All the way down to like the smaller scale, where like the people whose house we filmed at was my relatives. They literally had repainted their front door and all this stuff, fix it up because we were coming, and they wanted their house to look good and everything. We didn't ask.
Luckily, that door shot made it in.
Okay, yeah, you're right. The door shot made it in.
Yeah.
But yeah, like they let us film in there for like a whole day, and then they want to see their house in the movie, and then it gets cut, and that's kind of a bummer because it's people and love that are like supporting your art.
Yeah, I think that cut your favorite shot thing. The reason that resonates with me in terms of writing is generally the thing that you love the most is the thing that you've from the very beginning fought for, and gotten rid of any semblance of like you're defending it no matter what, right? Because you're so in love with it. And generally what that means is it's not going to fit with what the movie became. It was this thing in the beginning, and anything you've been fighting for since the beginning probably needs to be cut because of that.
Right.
Do you prefer writing with a screenwriting partner or prefer writing by yourself?
I prefer collaborating with a partner. I prefer having written with both partners and by myself. I prefer writing with myself, but I need someone like a producer or a director that I'm throwing ideas off of. Like, I really need that kind of back and forth. And I think it makes the project better to have more than one voice. But the actual writing process, I thought I would only like with a partner, but I've really fallen in love with doing it on my own. And I'm not sure I could ever. Well, I am writing something with someone else right now, but it's so slow going,
Yeah. Have you ever had a film that's been really close to like what you originally intended with your script, like something that when you were writing it and then when the movie finally was made and you saw it, it was very close to what you had originally intended? Or has it been like vice versa?
With the exception of the Church League movie, everything is way better than I intended it, which is the magic of filmmaking to me, and why I love collaborating so much. Is just what the actors bring, what the director brings, what the props bring. I mean, like, everything is just every element elevates it if you have the right team. There are some pieces that I was less happy with. And this is the kind of thing I've learned with filmmaking, which is great, is you go project to project, right? You're not a business where you hire somebody and that person is on your staff. You do this small project, and then in the next one, you take all the people that you love, and then you leave behind the people that maybe had a bad attitude or whatever, right? And so I feel like our crew kind of like tweaks and gets better with each new project. And we're just looking for people that elevate it. But even more than that, honestly, is the good attitude thing of, look, I'm going to be on with you for 16 hours. I need somebody that's not going to complain. And going to do the thing immediately and has a real passion for the project. And we're learning as producers of how to make people feel valuable. Like, I totally understand that, hey, this is our idea. If anybody's going to get a career boost out of this, it's going to be probably the director, maybe the actors, but really trying to figure out how to make people feel valuable. And the biggest compliment that we got out of the film was not on the film itself, but was all the cast and crew coming to us and say, hey, whatever you guys do, we're there. This is one of my favorite filmmaking experiences. And that was the biggest compliment for us, because that was one of our biggest goals as well. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the project is the project. It's going to be fun. It's going to be awesome. But if life is really about connecting with other people like we claim, then that's got to be priority, right? It's how we treat people.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Hey, speaking of, I guess, just other people bringing things to the table, have you watched that show Devs yet?
I haven't. I really want to.
Oh man, I know Ellis just started it. Brad and I have watched it. It's a great show, but there's like this part of their like set design is in the woods, and this is not a spoiler, but it's in like the woods where there's this path. They have the trees lit with these circle lights around the trees, and I mean it's literally used in their promotional material.
Yeah.
Stuff. And you think like people think, oh, that's definitely was either the writer or the director or whatever. But when I read the interview with Alex Garland, that's his name, right? The director. Yeah, I read an interview with him, and it's
writer.
Like, yeah, and he wrote it, and this wasn't even his idea. You know, they were just like, how are we going to light this path? They got to walk down, and the gaffer was like, oh, I know what to do. And he said, I'm just going to light it where the bottom of the tree's lit, the top's going to look like it's cut off, you know, and it's like these circular lights. And he was like, that sounds cool, you know, the guy just went and did it, and then it became so iconic looking. Literally, some of the shots are framed up with Nick Offerman, and it looks like a halo. It feels it feels so intentional. You know, it feels like this is part of the theme and everything. But that happened because the gaffer brought that to the table. You know.
Well, I'm sure you guys recognize this, is that all the things that people come up to me and were like, oh, this was so genius in your writing. I'm like, dude, that was an accident. Like, we totally did not make it.
Yes.
Or people will point out like thematic things that we did on purpose. And some we did, but some were like, oh, I didn't even think about that. That makes me look really smart.
But sometimes it's subconscious. You don't know you're doing it,
true.
But it's, you know what I mean? There's definitely times where you're pulling from something, you just don't realize it, and it all definitely comes together cohesively at the end. Yeah. And you look like a genius.
Yeah, but no, I was talking to some friends the other day just about the sheer amount of TV content right now, and like how people will come and like, this is the best show I've ever seen. I'm like, I've never even heard of that show. And I feel like I have very little time. Like if I do have time, I spend it writing or I spend watching a movie. And so I'll occasionally, like I'll take on one show at a time. Yeah. I did just finish Mr. Robot, which I thought was
I just started that.
See, I need to get back into that.
Yeah.
Do you think you've had more time or less time since the pandemic?
I've actually had less time. I am surprisingly slammed. I work a day job doing design and marketing, and then I have some side gigs doing the same thing, freelance, to kind of help prop me up. And those two worlds are just, I can't believe how busy they are right now. And so I've been really working nonstop, which I'm so grateful for. And this is the thing with this period in time too, is A, my family's healthy. B, I've got a steady paycheck coming in. So like I'm as grateful as I could possibly be. And I always feel a little guilty complaining about my movie didn't come out. You know what I mean? And I just had a long conversation with other filmmaker friends who were about to premiere at 3 festivals in one weekend. They all got canceled, and my heart just broke for them. So we've had a lot of these conversations about like, no, we still have these feelings. We can't deny these feelings. They are real, and you can't really compare them with another person's situation. But it's just it's a weird, complicated time that we're all feeling all these things and not prepared to deal with these feelings.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I want to bring up is tell us a little bit about ScriptBlast, Mirrorbox Films. You know, you seem like, you know, obviously you're doing a lot of marketing, design, you're doing writing, but I feel like you have your hands in podcasts and, you know, like all sorts of different aspects of, you know, film and media. So how did that come about?
Well, here's really how it lands is I believe that a lot of writers think that they write a screenplay and I thought this for about 10 years. I'd write a screenplay, I'd send it out to LA, it'll get picked up and somebody will make it and I'll blow up, right? And that's what I tried for 10 years on the heels of that Lionsgate deal, and just struggled and couldn't make stuff happen until I started making stuff myself. But what I realized is there's all these pieces to a screenwriting career that most people don't realize. One is writing. Yeah, you got to learn how to write and learn the fundamentals and get better at the craft. But there's these other areas that are just as important as that, which are like, building relationships, getting yourself out there so people actually know who you are. Mm-hmm. And I just did this workshop, which people can find at scriptblast.com. That's all about this. What are the other pieces? The other one is productivity. So like really learning how to sit down and get the work done, not just when you feel like it, but writing every day, mm-hmm. kind of mindset practices to deal with the constant rejection. So there's all these pieces that people don't really realize when they're first starting out. And because I had those really drastic up and down experiences with writing, I needed a place where I could talk about that openly. And so I couldn't find it, so I started one. So that's what ScriptBlast started out. It was an Instagram account posting kind of inspirational quotes and stuff in a Facebook group where it's really a safe place to talk about the struggles of screenwriting. And so I've been doing those for about 4 years or so now. In the communities, I think we're up to like 800 people in the Facebook group, and there's like a whole bunch of people follow us on Instagram. And I finally just launched a workshop for the first time, and I do some screenwriting speaking gigs and stuff. But ultimately, for me, it was like, hey, what did I need when I was first starting out? Mm-hmm. If I can't find it, I want to provide it for people. And just a lot of people don't talk about like the mental side of screenwriting, because it is really, really hard. And a lot of people give up. They write one screenplay, get a bad review or get rejected from a festival, and they're like, oh, that's it, I'm not doing it anymore. And the people that really thrive are the people that learn how to handle that. Actually, the two guys that I wrote with, they both stopped writing after that bad experience. And it just breaks my heart. So I want to try to help writers, and that's how ScriptBlast started. So you can find all that stuff at scriptblast.com. Mirrorbox started kind of in the same reason, but on the filmmaking side is I had such an amazing experience doing This World Alone. I was like, how can I make this happen for other writers? So it started as a way for me to get my own voice and brand out there. And then also we started this writers group with 4 other writers. And what we said was, how can we take the idea of what we did with This World Alone, ultra low budget, kind of contained fantasy, sci-fi, action kind of stories, horror stories. And so they all fit this kind of model. And then the idea would be to raise money for all of them at once and try to get them all made like in a year's time. And that way, if one takes off, it props up the other ones, right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what it started as. Mm-hmm. And I just quickly realized that it's really hard to raise money. So so those scripts are out there, and we're still trying to get attention on them. And it's been cool during this time because the industry is a little more open to reading things and looking at things, because everybody's just kind of sitting at home and nobody's producing. So we've had some new opportunities come up. But that was a cool opportunity to invest in other writers. The way we did it was I had these 4 writers come in. We're all in Atlanta, and I said we're each going to pitch 10 ideas. And so we put 40 ideas up on the board, and then we each chose the one that we really were most passionate about.
That's really cool.
And then we would get together on a monthly basis and build those scripts up and give notes, and kind of like a Pixar brain trust format kind of thing. And it was an amazing process, and loved it. And then I felt like I let all the writers down, because I was like, oh, we can't really make these yet. So we're kind of sitting on them. But in addition to that, we wanted to just go ahead and launch the brand. So like the new book that's coming out, the anthology book, is going to be a Mirrorbox anthology. The movie will come out under that production banner, and hopefully we'll be doing lots more things to help get voices out there. So that was the cool thing about the anthology. A lot of those writers had never had anything published. A lot of them we're across 4 continents, so it's people in other countries that are getting their work out into the United States for the first time. We do a blog for that same reason that we haven't really kept up with, but the idea was to, hey, how can we spotlight all these small creators that don't normally get a spotlight? So all that's kind of coming together. And the thing that I'm realizing, it's funny that you bring up all that stuff, is because right now that I've had time to sit, I'm like, do I have the energy to keep all of these projects going all the time? So I'm having to make some tough decisions of what's really important to me, what I really have time for, because you can only juggle so many things before you start dropping them. And I don't want to, half-ass anything. So I'm making some tough decisions about that right now, and I'm not sure where that's going to land. But yeah, basically all that stuff came out of wanting to help other people and wanting to get my own voice out there as well.
Awesome.
That's
Awesome.
One last question I have is for a lot of people starting out, I know the first script I ever wrote, this was probably back in high school, I submitted it to a screenplay competition. What's your thoughts on that? Like on screenplay competitions in general?
I think they can be good, and I think they can be a waste of money. I think you have to find the really good ones, and here's how kind of I suggest it. My favorite screenwriting competition is one called Finish Line Script Competition, finishlinescriptcomp.com. And the reason I love it, I'm now friends with the lady that runs it because I loved the competition so much and we really connected. But the way they do it is you pay to enter and you get a set of notes, and then you can rewrite the script and then enter the rewritten version for free. So that process was really cool because it's not just about give us your script and we might give you a laurel, or you might get nothing and you wasted all your money. It's actually you're investing in the writer and you're actually making the writer better. And those notes that I got from that particular one are some of the best notes I've ever got. So they really do a fantastic job. The second side of that is, so you get value just for entering. So the other one I would suggest is, it's not a competition, but I like blacklist.com too, because you actually get value out of it just by putting it on there. So value just by entering, you should get something, right? A lot of them do give notes, so I would make sure it's something like that. The other one was make sure that what you win is something that's actually going to boost your career. Most of these that you random screenplay competition in the middle of nowhere, you get like a little laurel and it's cool. You get to brag about it, but it's not going to do anything for you. Nobody's even going to care when you send out those emails to Hollywood. Nobody cares about that middle of nowhere festival. But the best ones are like Finish Line or like Blacklist, where you get actual access to people. So Finish Line, if you place, like even in the top 40, I think you get a mentoring phone call.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's really
and then
cool.
if you win, you actually get 20 meetings with different industry people all across LA. And so to have actual value like that, those are the ones I really believe in. And so I think you can kind of use that as a checklist of, hey, do you get value just by entering? Or are you just throwing money at it? And then do you get actual access or get actual some kind of career boost as a result of winning? So
cool.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, I guess, Brad and I did ScriptBlast, your podcast, recently. And I felt like definitely a part of the theme there was we talked about just not giving up. That was sort of the overall advice, was like you were saying, your friends who stopped writing, after that bad experience. And it was funny because after that podcast, I was just looking at stuff online, and something I ran across was, do you remember Rebecca Black, she had that single, it was like a viral hit, Friday, right?
Yeah.
And my wife wasn't really familiar with it somehow. I guess she missed that viral hit, but I was showing her that. Then I was like, oh, she's still putting out music. There's new songs. And I was like, that inspired me, man. Cause you have to imagine that girl at however old she was like a child, and people were just ripping her to shreds. And she's still, now she's putting out music, and and it's decent. It's good. Like her voice is actually way better. Her music video quality looked really solid. So I was like, that's kind of a funny little anecdote there. I ran across that after we had that conversation, and I was like, this girl is still out there, pursuing her dream. And despite the fact that she had I guess what would be sort of a big success, and that everyone knew who she was, but everyone was,
making fun of her. Yeah, I can't imagine how devastating that must have been. And I do think I struggle with that sometimes. Like, should some people quit? You know what I mean? Like, are some people just not cut out for it?
Uh-huh.
And the thing that I tell writers is the only reason you should quit is if you stop loving it, right? As long as you have a passion for it, as long as when you sit down to write, it fills you with joy, then you should be doing that thing. And I think that you can, I don't think joy comes from success. I think it comes from the doing of the thing, right? Like, and you guys know this, working on film sets and stuff. I mean, there's no experience that competes with creating something. I call it creating beautiful things with beautiful people, right? Like that's the height, right? Whether you're doing that for $100 or you're doing that for 10 million bucks, the doing, nothing replaces it, right? And the receiving of that, whether people love it or not. I mean, like Rebecca Black probably loved making that Friday music video. She probably loved recording that song, and the joy comes from that, not in the reception of it.
Right.
And I think people have to focus on that, like really focus on the doing. And I think that keeps you going too, because like the screenwriting thing, you write one screenplay, you put it out there, and you're like, oh, I'm going to be successful. No, you shouldn't be waiting to be successful. You should be writing the second screenplay, right?
Right. Awesome. Yeah, that's great advice.
So what are you working on now? Anything you can share?
Yeah, we've got our follow-up to This World Alone. It's called Guacamole Yesterdays. We have a finished script. We have a cast. We have locations. We have a crew, and we don't have the money yet. So we are trying to solve that problem right now. We're talking with money people, but it's a much longer process than we ever hope. And now we're having those conversations of like, can we make it cheaper? Can we just go out and do it on the weekends? And, that whole battle. So yeah, there's that project. There is, I'm doing some for-hire writing, which is really, really cool experience that hopefully will be out in the world at some point in the future. And then what else? Yeah, I mean, really just getting This World Alone out into the world and getting the anthology book out and trying to find our audience for that. It's going to be a big priority for the next couple months as well.
Awesome. Well, yeah, tell everybody where they can find you online.
Yeah, so you can go to scriptblast.com to find the screenwriting side of things, or find our ScriptBlast on Facebook, which is our screenwriting Facebook group, and mirrorboxfilms.com is where you can find the production side of things. And then I'm at Hudson Phillips on Twitter and Instagram.
Cool.
Sweet.
Awesome. Dude, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been great.
Yeah, this is amazing. We'll definitely do it again.
For sure.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you.
Bye.